Happy Monday and welcome to another episode of Brain Scratch, Case Cracked. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. And in some of these cases, those pieces take a long time to come around and come into play. Today's case is no different. This is one that comes to us from China and is a case we like to call Baby Come Home. It was February 23rd, 1986, and China's one-child policy, in which parents were allowed to have only one child, preferably a boy, was in full swing. Although there was some leeway in the rural areas, this was strictly enforced in the cities. Li Jingzi and her husband, Mao Yin, who lived in the city, had just given birth to their first and only child, a healthy baby boy named Mao Yin. Putting all their hopes and dreams into their son, they nicknamed him Jia, which means great. Jia was a delight for everyone. During the week, while both of his parents worked in their home city of Xi'an, the capital of Shanxi province in central China, the boy spent time in daycare. But after work and on weekends, the family always tried to find some fun outing that would entertain and teach him at the same time. Jingzi worked for a grain exporting company in town, but at harvest time, in October of 1988, she left for a few days to visit suppliers in the countryside. During the day, Jia would go to daycare, and when his father returned from work in the afternoon, would pick him up and take him home. But on this day, before reaching home, Jia got hot and asked his father for some water. Luckily, they were near a family-owned hotel and were able to stop in to get a drink. While his father went inside to get the drink, Jia stood at the entrance. A moment later, when his father returned, his son was no longer there. Thinking the 2.5-year-old had just wandered off, Jing searched but found nothing and soon contacted police. When Jingzi received the telegram from her husband, it contained only 6 words: "Emergency at home, return right away." Not knowing what had happened, she rushed home only to be told that her son was missing. Her shock was profound, but through that she was determined to find Jia. At first, the couple thought that a kind person would find him wandering and bring him to the police, but after a week with no sightings or leads, she knew the situation was much more serious. She knew she had to do more. As she went from door to door and business to business in town, she handed out flyers of Mao Yin. She next went to Xi'an's railway and bus stations. She even placed missing persons advertisements in local newspapers. Before she was done, she would hand out or place over 100,000 flyers. None of them led to anything concrete. Every night, she would go home with an empty heart to an empty home where she could only stare at her son's possessions. In the beginning, Jingzi and her husband worked together to find Jia. This soon turned into their only passion and drove a wedge between the two rather than drawing them together. Finally, after 4 long years, the couple decided to divorce. Jingzi would not be deterred and continued her search. She worked in the evenings and weekends. Any lead she found was followed. Sometimes she would go for days without food or sleep in her pursuits. Every time, the child she found was not hers. After one particularly hard disappointment, Jingzi started to show signs of having a mental breakdown and started to hear her lost son's voice calling for her. On the advice of a friend, she decided to see a doctor about her troubles and from there, checked herself into a hospital. Jingzi would tell others of that time, quote, "A doctor said something that had a big impact on me. He told me, I can treat you for your physical illness, but as for the illness in your heart, that's up to you." His words made me think all that night. I felt I couldn't go on like this. If I didn't try to control my emotions, I might really go crazy. If I became insane, I wouldn't be able to go out to look for my child, and one day, if my child came back and saw a crazy mother, it would be so pitiful for him, Jingzi said. So she made a decision. As her sister packed up Jia's clothes and toys, Jingzi decided to shift her focus. As she started to see the world around her again, she realized that there were many parents who had missing children in China. With them, she realized that she could form a network, and they could cover the entire country. The group drew up flyers and sent bags of them through their network to all 10 provinces. She also began to see that some of these children were not simply lost, but had been kidnapped and sold to new parents. When China instituted their one-child policy in 1979 to control population growth, many parents were left at a disadvantage. Elderly Chinese relied on their sons to not just carry on the family name, but to provide care for them in their old age. Unfortunately, this helped contribute to the rise of male child abductions. Although many leads were generated through this new network, none of them were for Jia. After 19 years, in 2007, Jingzi took things a step further and began working on a volunteer basis for the website Baby Come Home, which helps reunite families with their missing children. Suddenly, she didn't feel lonely any longer. With volunteers all over the country working toward the same goal, she felt more at peace. She thought, even if my child is not found, I can help other children find their home. Over the next 13 years, Jingzi would help 29 children reconnect with their parents. Those reunions gave her hope that someday her child would return to her also. Without that hope, she didn't feel she could keep living. In 2009, China's Ministry of Public Security established a DNA database where couples with lost children could register their DNA. Those samples are compared to those on file and others that are given voluntarily. To date, this program has helped find more than 6,000 missing children. In 2015, Jingzi's 94-year-old mother passed away. She had missed her grandson every day that he was gone. At one point, she'd even dreamed that the boy had come back to the family after almost 30 years. Her mother passed on January 15th, which was also Jia's birthday. Taking that as a sign, on her mother's deathbed, Jingzi swore that she would finally find her son. In April of 2020, she was given a lead regarding a man named Go Ningning, who had supposedly been taken from her province years ago. Her informant was able to provide her with a picture. Police were able to confirm that the man lived in Chengdu in neighboring Sichuan province, just over 434 miles away. Not daring to hope that she had found Jia at last, Jingzi waited as police convinced the man to give a DNA sample and have it tested. On Mother's Day, May 10th, after 32 years and over 300 false leads, Jingzi finally got the call she had waited most of her life to hear. Go Ningning was indeed Mao Yin. 8 days later, the two nervously met. Jingzi was afraid that her son, who now owned his own interior decoration business and had a family of his own, would want nothing to do with her. Those fears quickly disappeared when the two met and embraced. As mother and son talked, she learned that Jia grew up in the neighboring province of Sichuan and attended university as well before starting his interior design business. Police told them that Jia had been sold to a childless couple for 6,000 yuan, which is about $840 in today's money. But that occurred about a year after he had disappeared. They couldn't account for his whereabouts in that year in between. When he was adopted, he was renamed and raised as the couple's only child. From there, he attended elementary school, middle school, and college in Chengdu City. Oddly enough, Jia had seen his mother on television before in her search for missing children. He remembered thinking what a warm-hearted person she was to do that work. He also thought that the picture of her son looked like him as a child, but not knowing he was adopted, he didn't make the connection. Mother and son would spend the next month looking at old photos, hoping to jog Jia's early memories. Unfortunately, he doesn't remember anything that happened before his adoption. Police are still investigating Jia's abduction, but so far have found no leads. Jingzi hopes that the culprits will be found and punished for causing her the heartache she suffered for so long. Now, she just wants to create new memories with her son. In the past few years, the Chinese government and media have spent a lot of time bringing attention to China's child abduction problem. Because of their efforts, the number of cases has started to fall, but there are still a lot of families out there looking for their children. When asked what she would do next, Jingzi replied that she would continue her work with Baby Come Home. And with more than 51,000 families registered on their site, she definitely has her work cut out for her. Case cracked. We would like to thank BBC.com, CBS News, the South China Morning Post, China.org.cn, and People.com. And of course, a big thank you to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case. And I just have to say, what incredible dedication. What an incredible mother. But I also do wonder about how tangled this can be. Now, Gia has other parents. There's another family. And despite the fact that they're not the ones that took him, there is still, in my mind, some level of, I don't want to say responsibility, but they paid someone for a boy that they knew wasn't theirs. So it's interesting to me to look at this situation and to try to figure the best way through it at this point. Obviously, they did a lot of great things for Gia, and he's put together a very good life for himself. But his mother missed so many years with him. So it's still kind of, I'm a little split on how I feel about that dynamic, but I believe having the truth and having the answers kind of trumps all of my concerns on that. While looking for a way to help Baby Come Home, we found a website for the Confucius Better World Foundation. Donations can be made to them, and they kind of support Baby Come Home. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a very direct way to donate specifically to them. So I will have a link in the description box below to them. This site also gives us some more detail and some other interesting challenges of these kidnapping situations. Here's a quote from it. Baby Come Home started out on a very small scale. Gradually, people learned of the assistance they could receive, and the number seeking help grew. Eventually, a website was developed and the staff increased. Now, there's even a DNA database with free DNA testing for parents with missing children. Financial support is incredibly important to these parents, as in most cases, they are extremely poor, live in rural areas, and are not well educated. In some cases, kidnapped children are abandoned and eventually fall into the care of Chinese orphanages, from where they may be adopted and sent abroad to loving families who are unaware of the fact that these children are stolen from their parents. We would appeal to any parents abroad who have adopted Chinese children to consider giving DNA samples to Baby Come Home. The aim of this is in no way to remove the children from the adoptive parents and reunite them with those in China. It is simply to give the original parents in China peace of mind and an end to their heartbreak, so that they can know finally what has become of their children. So that's just another crazy consideration in this, to think that these kids could have been abducted, tried to be sold, and then wound up in orphanages and then were legitimately adopted out. I mean, it complicates this. And of course, there you have records issues in terms of seeing what's happening around that adoption. It's almost like a little bit of a wall in terms of finding the truth here. Very, very tough considerations on these cases. One other interesting point that I found out about this, Baby Come Home also has an app that allows anyone who owns a smartphone to become an instant search volunteer just by taking a photo of a child they suspect may have been abducted. The Missing Children app then compares it to their missing persons database using facial recognition software. The result is almost instantaneous. There have been 686 successful cases, and they are still trying to help over 13,000 people. Isn't that crazy? That's such an interesting and good use of technology. I hope that we hear of more organizations working in that way. And of course, on behalf of my amazing supporters, we have made a donation to the Confucius Better World Foundation, who does also support Baby Come Home. And we hope that they'll support them, continue helping these families for a long, long time to come. Of course, I can't do donations like that without wonderful people like you. So a big thank you to PayPal supporters Hillary Green, Jean Carew, Brandy Fry, and Jennifer Dixon. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for PayPal, sign up for Patreon, or buy merchandise. All of it keeps me here and with limited commercials. Together, we'll continue learning about justice and how to keep ourselves and our families safe. I'll see you again on Wednesday with a new episode of Searchlight, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.